Let's just jump right into it, shall we? Today, we're unpacking a seriously high-stakes blueprint for surviving modern AI-driven cyber warfare. And look, this isn't some abstract theory. This doctrine comes straight from Estonia. If you know your cyber history, you already know Estonia took the hit on the first real national-scale cyber attack way back in 2007. They've literally been living on the digital front lines against a massively larger adversary ever since. And now, well, with artificial intelligence totally rewriting the rules of engagement, they've dropped this asymmetric defense strategy. It's essentially a playbook for how to outsmart your adversaries when there is just no way you can outspend them.
So when you hear the word hacker, you might still have this mental image of, a human expert hunched over a keyboard in a dark basement methodically typing out code to crack into a server. Yeah, it's time to completely toss that outdated Hollywood trope out the window. The absolute most terrifying shift in the modern threat landscape is that cyber attacks just don't move at human speed anymore. They are moving at machine speed. AI has fundamentally flipped the script on the cost curve. It's made offensive campaigns unbelievably fast, shockingly cheap, and, well, effortlessly scalable.
Just take a look at the brutal economic reality of this shift. Back in 2018, mounting a truly serious, targeted cyber attack cost an adversary what we call expert months. It meant deploying a highly skilled, elite unit that had to spend serious time hunting down a vulnerability and handcrafting an exploit. Fast forward to 2026, and that marginal cost, it's plummeted to mere compute hours. AI is completely automating the reconnaissance, the vulnerability discovery, the whole shebang. Attackers aren't just carefully picking off a single target anymore. They're running thousands of tailored attempts in parallel, literally piggybacking on the exact same digital infrastructure that runs our legitimate economy.
And this economic shift creates an immediate, frankly terrifying danger: the absolute collapse of the patch window. You know, that precious little sliver of defensive time between when a software flaw is found and when it's actively weaponized out in the wild? We've gone from having, say, months or maybe weeks to secure our systems back in 2018 to a reality where weaponization is sometimes happening literally before the vulnerability is even publicly disclosed. It's wild.
10 hours. Let that sink in. That is the striking metric we're staring down for the average time to exploit by 2026. When a fully functional exploit can be passed around the dark web in under half a day, human-paced defense is, well, it's obsolete. If a security team has to convene a committee meeting just to approve a patch, they've already lost the war. The attacker only needs to find one tiny crack to succeed, meaning they can tolerate thousands of cheap AI-generated errors. But the defender, we have to be 100% accurate every single time. Because if you accidentally block the wrong legitimate system, you might just take an entire hospital offline.
All right, moving into Section 1, the true target, which is the erosion of democratic trust. To really grasp this threat, we have to look past the technical nuts and bolts and understand the ultimate endgame. A sustained cyber campaign against a democracy isn't usually about just stealing money or blowing up a power plant. Instead, these attackers are serving up a really sophisticated cocktail of chaos to manufacture doubt. They'll compromise some obscure open-source library deep in a supply chain, then industrialize the exploitation of older legacy systems, maybe disrupt a highly visible local service like a transit system, and top it off by using AI to deepfake the speech and signatures of senior officials. They meticulously sequence these disruptions to trigger cascading failures. The goal? Make the targeted country look completely incompetent to its own citizens, and make sure the government is always one step behind the evening news cycle. And underneath all this surface-level chaos, you've got cyber defenders sweating it out, monitoring a massive systemic threat. We're talking sub-threshold military-grade pressure here, and it's deliberately engineered to be super ambiguous. By hiding behind proxies, criminal gangs, and fake hacktivist groups, the aggressor keeps every single incident just below that crucial legal threshold that would trigger a massive armed allied response, like NATO's Article 5. It's incredibly devious because it forces the targeted government into a slow, chaotic response that they have to handle all on their own. So here is the exact step-by-step playbook they use. First, disrupt daily services until the average citizen really starts to feel the sting. Second, distort the information space so nobody even knows what the truth is anymore. Third, demoralize the public officials, which absolutely paralyzes critical decision-making. And finally, they hit the jackpot, the total erosion of public trust. Think about it. A free society entirely runs on the shared belief that its institutions actually work. If citizens and markets accumulate enough doubt, the aggressor has successfully crippled that government, all without firing a single kinetic shot.
Which brings us to Part 2, the asymmetric defense doctrine.
So, how on earth do you fight back when you can't just throw more money at an AI-powered adversary? Well, you change the rules of the game. You adopt Estonia's asymmetric defense doctrine. This is all about picking your battleground, driving down your own defense costs, massively jacking up the cost for the attacker, and ultimately denying them that political payoff they're so desperately after. The very first policy here? Ruthless prioritization. You have to define your minimum viable state. Because look, if a state tries to defend absolutely everything to the highest possible standard, they usually end up defending nothing well. Governments have to look in the mirror and answer a really tough question. What are the absolute core functions that we literally cannot afford to lose for even a single hour?
To actually build that out, you divide the state into 3 crystal clear tiers. Right at the top, you've got the minimum viable state. We're talking population registers, core banking rails, hospital emergency systems. For these, the tolerance for downtime is measured in minutes. They need constant, independent auditing and heavily rehearsed backups. Then, the second tier is your regulated essential services. Think public transit or the broader healthcare system, which can safely run in a degraded mode for maybe hours or days. And at the bottom is the wider economy, operating on a best-effort basis with a basic level of national cyber hygiene. This tiering ensures you are putting your absolute best armor precisely where it matters most.
All right, part 3. Hardening the national trust backbone. Once you've figured out exactly what you absolutely must protect, you move to the second big policy, hardening that trust backbone. In a modern digital state, trust can't just be this abstract thing that every random government agency tries to invent for itself. Digital trust has to be treated as tangible, rock-solid national infrastructure. It's a federated family of services that basically guarantees that whenever a citizen, a government official, or even an AI agent does something, they can definitively prove exactly who they are and that they're authorized to do it. You've got digital identity and qualified signatures to prove who's acting. You've got authoritative registries acting as the cryptographic source of truth, and you have secure exchange channels to move all that data safely. This completely replaces that messy, dangerous patchwork of custom software integrations that hackers just absolutely love to exploit.
But let's be real for a second. Eventually, a system is gonna get breached. It's inevitable. So the genius here is designing for graceful failure. How do you fail well? First, redundancy. You never ever rely on just a single vendor for a critical trust function. Second, rehearsed fallbacks. Actually, scratch that. If a backup plan hasn't been heavily tested with real-world traffic, it's not a fallback. It's just a hope. Third, you ensure data integrity right at the source, making any intrusion easy to box in and reverse. And fourth, keeping systems totally separated, so one localized breach doesn't spread like wildfire and take down the entire country.
Moving right along into part 4, raising the baseline and building resilience.
So now that we've locked down the absolute core, how do we handle the rest of the nation's digital footprint to shut down those cheap, easy attack paths? We have to scale the collective defense. This means treating basic security standards not just as annoying paperwork, but as mandatory operating licenses, enforced by regulators who aren't afraid to hand out real penalties. It means giving defenders the pre-approved legal authority to fight back at machine speed. Remember that tiny 10-hour window we talked about earlier? It also means adopting this Nordic-style total defense mindset, where everyone from the elite professional to the everyday citizen is part of one massive cyber workforce. And lastly, proactive transparency. Honestly, just telling the public the truth about an incident right away is the single easiest way to rob the attacker of the chaos and doubt they are trying to create.
At the end of the day, the goal here isn't to be perfectly invulnerable. No state can block every single attack. The real win is making those attacks non-decisive. It's about making sure that an incident doesn't spiral into a crisis, and a crisis doesn't spiral into total national paralysis. The adversary spends a fortune, and they get absolutely zero political payoff. A truly resilient democracy is one where a citizen can watch the system bend under immense, terrifying pressure and still fundamentally trust that it's going to hold.
So I want to leave you with a thought. We've talked a lot about macro-level state doctrines, compute-hour economics, and trust backbones. But ultimately, all of this comes down to the individuals living inside those systems. If your nation's critical infrastructure bent tomorrow under a massive, machine-speed AI attack, are you ready to trust that it would hold? What does your own personal readiness look like when faced with that kind of digital disruption? Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive gave you a sharper, clearer picture of the asymmetric digital realities we're all navigating today.